Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest edition of the World Report. I'm Scott Crowfoot. We'd like to welcome our friends from Kuwait to the family of our expanding show. On today's report, oil is on the rebound, but why? Are we seeing the clarification of the factions of the Middle East? Rent-a-mobs and the Democracy Spring coming soon to a town near you. Trump the wild card. How far will both sides collude in trying to halt this national movement? As history always repeats itself, we'll tell you why the election of 2016 is going to be a lot like one of yesteryear. But now to our top stories. While the U.S. is lightening up on our communist neighbors, there are some unanswered questions as well as unintended consequences. Joining us as always, a man on a mission, economics blogger for USA Today Online, and the World Report senior analyst, Maury Beschloss, whom you can follow at mbeschloss on Twitter. Maury, there's a ton to explore when we start to unravel the relationship that the U.S. and Cuba has, why it's been strained, why this president wants to untangle it. We can get into Guantanamo Bay, the drilling off of the coast of Cuba.
Bear pigs.
All kinds of different scenarios. The money that they owe us. What do you make of this
Well,
this
first
movement?
of all, the most horrible thing about it, it almost started a nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union in 1962, because the Soviet Union had planted the delivery system for the nuclear systems under our nose back at that particular time. And this was Kennedy's high point. He found out about it, and he negotiated it in a way that nobody knew that he did. His brother Bobby made a contact with the Russian ambassador, and they junior senator from Alaska, when I mentioned my low opinion of John Kerry, he says that's not even the half of it. The guy is a traitor to the United States of America. And he said chapter and verse of when he came back from Vietnam and how he accused the United States of committing the most horrible, heinous acts in Vietnam, and saying that we, the United States, were the war criminals.
So we talked off the air a little bit about this. We're allowing them to drill for their own oil, which we can't even do.
But good point. There's about a very big chunk of the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico coast, relates to Cuba as far as the ability to drill. Nobody's doing that now because the prices are low, but when they get back to even, which, by the way, I will predict right now will be around $60 a barrel by mid-year, the Cubans will start getting a lot of oil out of there, and they will be permitted to do so because we're not going to stand in their way.
And they don't have the technology. I mean, they're still driving around in 1950s Chevrolets, for crying out loud. So
That's true.
Who's going to help them with the rigs and with the drilling? Here comes the United States again.
Well, American business doesn't have any, shall we say, has no sense of compatibility or a sense of
Loyalty.
right or wrong. They only want the money. Why do you think all these companies in Europe are falling in line with Iran? They don't care how Iran is treating their people or how horrible they are, and the fact that they're putting a missile in the air saying wipe Israel off the map and nobody's saying anything, because the world business people have no conscience whatsoever.
And they owe us billions of dollars to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's another country that has a debt to the United States. They want to come after the American citizens for everything that we have, but yet we've got trillions of dollars all around the world that's uncollected from people, and we're still giving away foreign aid like it's candy.
Well, this is something that Trump is verbalizing very effectively. Look at Saudi Arabia. They make $1 billion every day, right now, even with the low price of oil, and we're still helping them out with sending ammunition over there, protecting them in the United Nations or whatever. I happen to think in this case that Trump is absolutely right. We are the biggest suckers in the world. We have a $20 trillion or near $20 trillion deficit, and we're still giving money away like it's going out of style.
And our trade deals are in the negative of billions and billions of dollars that we're just getting scammed on.
I can't even give you the number. It's so big.
So you've got a communist regime that really has done nothing for its people. Less than 5% of them even have internet access.
Well, I think there's only one thing they've done, and I don't mean to be disputatious here, but they have the literacy rate in Cuba has never been higher. Before that, it isn't like they had a great regime. They had a dictatorship, but it was a typical South American dictatorship.
With Batista.
Fulgencio Batista. I'll tell you, he did one good thing. He got my father out of Germany with a bribe from my father's uncle, whose wife was a cousin of the governor of New York, who sent $40,000 to Batista to get my father out on Crystal Night when they were putting leading Jewish families or leaders of families.
He was personally involved?
Yes. My father was ready to be sent to one of the German concentration camps. And the Social Democratic Party in Germany, which had gone underground by then, was good at taking, the only good thing they did is they got people out. It was an underground, literally. They got them to Hamburg. In the meantime, my father's uncle's wife got in touch with her cousin, the governor of New York, Herbert Lehman. And Herbert Lehman sent $40,000 to Batista to get my father out of Germany. And he got out by virtue of a banana boat, a Cuban banana boat that was floating in the Baltic Sea, went to Hamburg, stopped at Hamburg, and my father got on with a whole bunch of bananas, but he got out of there.
Wow.
And went to Cuba.
Is there anything for us to gain from this maneuver with Cuba? I mean, we're going to do hotel deals. Like you said, the business is going to start to flourish.
I would say we're going to be no better or no worse off than we were before. But you're right. We're giving legitimacy to a regime where a lot of people lost their lives trying to fight it. And as I was saying to you off air, what about the thousands of Cubans that risked their lives to get to Florida? And they must now feel pretty silly about the whole thing.
Well, and as we saw on TV, they were beating up dissidents and dragging them, stripping them naked and dragging them into jail right before the president showed up. So their human rights record is atrocious.
It isn't going to change. I mean, as long as you got, it's like in Russia isn't much different than the Soviet Union, except it's strictly Russia now rather than a bunch of other countries.
How much do you think Guantanamo Bay has to do with this? Do you think this has anything to do with it?
No, just another one of Obama's ways of thumbing his nose at anything that decent people have done. And I still think about the murders of Fort Hood, where 13 Americans were killed. That guy still hasn't been judged guilty. He should have been shot on the spot. And what about this traitor Bergdahl? We let loose 5 murdering scum who were back doing their dirty work in the Middle East and in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And in the meantime, this guy Bergdahl, they finally admitted that he is a traitor, that he deserted. And you know what in the Army, you know what happens to a deserter?
Should be shot.
They are shot in wartime. In wartime, during the war, the only people that we ever shot that were in the military were those that deserted.
Now, Congress has not declared this a war, but it is a war. I mean, we've been at war for the last 15 years.
We've been at war starting with Korea back in the 1950s.
So the Cuban exiles and the Cuban people are standing there watching this happen, realizing that they're not getting any benefit out of this.
No, it isn't like the regime is changing, and you've got my wife visited there a couple of years ago, and she said they're really, really wonderful people. I mean, they are well educated, but they're educated under the regime, so they know how to read and write, which before they couldn't. But I would say you're not going to get a democratic regime out of this deal. This is only strengthening the hand of Raul Castro and his bunch so that now he can say, okay, now we don't have the United States giving us a hard time anymore.
And I noticed that we talk about regime change all over the world, like with Gaddafi and the whole Arab Spring debacle and all that. But yet they've never mentioned that about Cuba, ever. Have you ever heard anyone in this administration say anything like that?
No, because I'm sure they figured eventually that's going to be to their benefit not to say anything. Well, actually, this administration has not said anything negative about any kind of these arbitrary, mandatory type of regimes.
The only time it does seem like that is when you can take it and turn it into a communist dictatorship.
Well, the Arab Spring was a murderous regime. I mean, if you recall, in June 2009, when you had the decent people of Iran, you know, Iran was for a Mideastern country, was very advanced, very progressive, very secular by then. And at that time, if the president had interfered and said, we're going to support the rebellion, I think Iran today would have been a decent country. But he never even mentioned anything.
So you do believe that if the president and this administration had stepped up, they could have forced something to happen in Iran?
Absolutely.
See, I don't believe that.
I do. I really do. Because I remember when they had killed that woman, they had thousands and thousands of people demonstrating in Tehran. There were pitched battles going on.
Well, they had thousands and thousands of people demonstrating in Tiananmen Square, too. And look what happened to those people.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, these were just people making a one-shot deal. In Tehran, this thing had been building up weeks and weeks before and reached its culmination in June, the first year that Obama became president.
Yeah, and the authoritarian dictatorship over there, the mullahs, put a squash to it. I mean, they just murdered people right in the streets.
But they were afraid. They were really afraid. They thought they were going to get toppled. And all it was needed was a strong position from the United States could have made the difference.